Hello world and welcome to the program. This is Alex and the new episode of Ukrainian Unleashed, a podcast where you'll get along with Ukrainians and also observe how the global scenery impacts Ukrainian society in these exciting times. We speak about events, trends, individuals and lifestyles of modern Ukrainians. So let's jump right in. I'm sure that information, regardless different opinions, must always be relevant and credible. But nowadays, traditional and social media must be paid extra attention to. In my job, to prevent dissemination of fakes, I rely on journalism standards that help to make a more effective data analysis. I encourage my team to use direct references and alternative sources of information for minimizing the risks of being misled or even fooled. But this issue is still challenging. So today let's talk about how can Ukrainians improve their resilience to disinformation. Democratic regimes are being the most effective in building impartial welfare and de-escalating social conflicts. But it seems like today's democracies are paradoxically under threat of being claimed as unequal and insecure regimes challenging to withstand the new political and cyber threats. These threats are affecting the mass consciousness of entire states to ruin the credibility and collective trust. We see that the populism tendencies rising from within Western democracies and the attempts to corrupt the democratic institutions are now tackled by the new methods of hybrid warfare. The intensification of global competition has turned modern media into a powerful tool for achieving advantages in political, economic, military, social, spiritual, and other spheres, which is in fact an online form of military actions, economic sanctions, and political isolation. Today, in the European context, support for populism depends on the issues of globalization, social inequality, and environmental protection. Therefore, instead of looking for real solutions for these problems, politicians and citizens often blame migrants or state institutions. But in addition to economic and cultural reasons, which can be visible, support for populism can also arise from cognitive errors, lack of critical thinking, or irrationality. For example, the British newspaper The Guardian recently published the results of a large-scale study of populism in 19 countries. The study found a link between a lack of critical thinking and people's belief in unsubstantiated things. Thus, people who tend not to apply critical thinking in everyday life support those politicians who promise to deliver unrealistic things. Another problem is that in polarized political environments, citizens are confronted with different deviating representations of reality, and therefore it becomes increasingly difficult for them to distinguish between false and true information. In their turn, instead of a deep, reasoned discussion, populists go down to manipulating and spreading disinformation. Here, the term disinformation is used in the sense of distorted, false, deliberately modified information aimed at achieving a certain psychological impact. The fact-checking organization First Draft also notes that even though facts and truth might feel the same, they appear to engage with different ideas about information. For example, what we know versus what they are not telling us. Official statistics versus unofficial discovery. Alan Dulles in The Craft of Intelligence notes that in democracies it's hard to deploy strategic disinformation dissemination in the media because it requires intense cooperation of all government agencies and top secrecy. This situation is simplified only during wartime when extra measures are available. Whereas in autocracies, with the centralization of power and full governmental control over the media, it is much easier to set up the disinformation-oriented infrastructure. Nevertheless, Western democracies today are under pressure of using increasingly sophisticated methods of disseminating inaccurate information through the media. In particular, there is a noticeable tendency to introduce the portions of false narratives into the neutral messages where they are difficult to notice. It helps to root them in the people's minds for further using in decision-making unconsciously. Given that for the globalized world, the media have become not only the dominant but often the only source of information, disinformation activities targeting the media open up favorable opportunities for increasing the scale and duration of their impact. It allows the use of new digital, viral, and psychological techniques. Their prolonged exposure puts to sleep the people's critical thinking, contributes to the mental vulnerability, and ultimately facilitates the achievement of the predefined results. Along with the development of the information society, the internet is also learning fast enough. Thus, in addition to exchanging ideas, it becomes a tool for reaching out to certain groups of users and actualizing sensitive issues, which leads to deliberately mass spreading of false or inaccurate information. There are more and more deviations on the internet called fake news, false messages which are often guided by fake photos, pseudo-eyewitness testimonies, and viral videos. The most convenient place for their distribution is social networks. The popularity of social networks has made possible not only the instant dissemination of any information or disinformation, but also direct access to the political, military, and other elites and opinion leaders in any country through the personal accounts. The ubiquity and anonymity of social networks make them an extremely effective tool for information warfare. The psychologist Ada Humprecht collected data from 18 Western democracies. The analysis revealed that disinformation is particularly prevalent on social media, and in countries with a majority of social media users, it is easier for rumor spreaders to build partisan follower networks. Based on this, the term disinformation resilience should be considered as the adaptability of states, societies, and individuals to political, economic, and social intentional pressure and falsehood spreading in various media formats to influence political and economic decisions, including targeting vulnerable groups in particular. Besides, in his book The Enigma of Reason, Hugo Mercier argues that human reasoning works pretty well in social environments, largely because in collective settings, unlike someone sitting alone at their computer, we are frequently made to justify our beliefs and actions to others. So if people had more opportunities to use their reasoning in social environments, they might be less susceptible to fake news. The media expert Clara Wirkfors also says that the principles of deliberative democracy can offer a means to counter these problems, but inherent flaws in social media mean that this form of participation must be in person and not just online. The problem is that humans are made for social dialogue, but many of the social media platforms we use now are not. It ultimately didn't provide a chance for individuals to protect themselves against disinformation coverage. In result, we must encourage organizing public events where inclusive communication between all the members of society could be achieved. In April 2015, based on the common decision to build a resilience against permanent disinformation campaigns arising from the Russian Federation, European Union has launched the East Stratcom Task Force Group. This is the group of experts aiming at maintaining unbiased communications between a number of countries such as Azerbaijan, Armenia, Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, and Russia. They help to resist the disinformation dissemination and publish the summary of cases marked as a pro-Kremlin propaganda on a weekly basis. The experts also reveal the main tendencies and narratives becoming viral in Russian social networks. For instance, one of the main topics nowadays is spreading of the disinformation against vaccination today happening around the globe. It became one of the reasons why the European Commission and the World Health Organization held the global summit about the importance of vaccination. At the end, the efforts in muting the sensitive narratives, able to mobilize the vulnerable groups of people, and launching of media literacy programs are the main components of building a democratic resilience against disinformation. There is a necessity to review the development of media landscape concerning the compliance of local media with the international journalism ethics codes, which is indeed an important tool to combat the spread of disinformation. Ada Hamprecht also argues that societies in which the consumers of news are distributed across a large number of media, some of which are peripheral, offer more entry points for disinformation spreading. So it should be admitted that critical media literacy skills have become a prerequisite for people to participate effectively in society. The state's ability to introduce or improve legislation concerning information security and other legal frameworks is also a key subject. Without an effective institutional structure and up-to-date legislation in place, disinformation channels cannot be fully under the control of the relevant regulatory agencies. For example, the audience that consumes the news content of a particular media needs to be assured legislatively about its real owners and their beliefs. The Ukrainian Analytical Center, Ukrainian Prism, in their publication Disinformation Resilience in Central and Eastern Europe, published in 2018, admits that Ukrainian resilience against Russian disinformation must be very diverse. First of all, as this is the main element of hybrid warfare which Russia uses against Ukraine permanently, together with military forces, trade wars, annexation and occupation of the territories. The main goal is to destabilize the political situation in Ukraine. Second of all, Ukrainian strategy of resilience must be intense and respond to the scale of Russian aggression. So now there are three main pillars of defending Ukrainian national interests, as Ukraine must be defended on its territory, in the regions being occupied, and on the international level. In the long run, the context of fake news narratives is based on the core post-war values such as multiculturalism, individual rights, and the rule of law. Lithuania's foreign minister Linas Linkevičius once commented on this, saying that, quote, "Disinformation is a very efficient weapon to demotivate people, to create doubt in leadership. The vacuum is never empty, but is filled by populism or nationalism or even radicalism. We are just starting to realize this is real," unquote. Eventually, the efforts of putting out sensitive narratives able to mobilize vulnerable groups of a population and providing of media literacy programs are paramount components of a democratic withstand against disinformation spreading. So if we are serious about defending democratic values, now is the time to admit to disinformation as one of the main threats. This was a new episode of Ukrainian Unleashed podcast. Thanks for being here with me. I also would love to thank Purple Planet for lovely musical compositions used in this episode. We did our best to extend our presence all over the web, so you may find us everywhere wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, check our pages in social media with fresh updates. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram accounts are waiting for you. And here is another update. We started releasing classy video content, which you can find on our pages on social networks and on our YouTube channel. These are video versions of podcast episodes and more. So come on in and take a look. See you very soon, guys.